Hey guys, welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show. I'm your host, EJ Holland. We'll let people funnel in here. As always, love to get to your questions and interact with you guys. We're running a new promotion over at thewolverine.com right now. So if you subscribe, you only pay $10 and you get an entire year's subscription. Well, maybe not a full year, but all the way up until next football season. So $10 gets you premium insider information to all your latest recruiting information, team information. Basketball season is right around the corner. So again, the promo is $10 until next football season. All you have to do is head over to thewolverine.com and subscribe right now. As always, guys, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is completely free. Um, the more likes we get, the more it helps the algorithm, the more monetization we're able to get, the more travel budget I'm able to get to travel around and see recruits. And if you guys are willing, you can drop a super chat. And that helps again support our travel budget so I can travel around and see different prospects around the country. If you do drop a super chat, your question will be answered first, immediately, right away, in depth answer if you drop a super chat. And last house cleaning item before we get to questions, which are already coming in. Um, this will be a bit of a shorter show than usual. I am traveling tomorrow instead of on Friday, so a short week for me. So we'll be cutting the show in half. So hope to get to all your questions. Might not get to all of them, so drop your super chat. All right, let's go ahead and go to the first one. And this comes from Darren Harvey, who submitted his questions like 5 minutes before the show started. So shout out to you, man. Um, with Chris Peel trending to Georgia and Jair Hill's roller coaster recruitment, will Michigan land any defensive backs in the 2023 recruiting class? So Chris Peel announced his decision date of October 23rd today. So that is this weekend. He is set to make a decision. Right now, all the picks still on Georgia. My pick's still on Georgia at this time. But Peel hasn't told Michigan no. They are still trying there. Obviously, they have strong connections at Providence Day. Former Michigan Wolverine Jonathan Goodwin is an assistant on the Providence Day staff. And they've done a really good job of recruiting Peel. Remember, Michigan wasn't really considered a major contender for Peel early in the process before they really started to make a run in the summer, got him on campus for an unofficial visit, got him back on campus for an official visit in September. So I think this is very much a Georgia Michigan battle. Um, I think the big thing or the big difference between Michigan and Georgia right now that would give Michigan an advantage is Georgia has a loaded secondary class with a few cornerbacks already committed that are highly touted. Michigan obviously has no cornerback commits, and there's a need. I mean, you look at the roster right now: DJ Turner, Jamon Green, likely not back next season. That leaves you with Will Johnson as the only corner with actual experience, and then you have Jaden McBurrows, who's coming off an injury and is just starting to get going. So yeah, I mean, there's a need for corner. There's an open spot for corner. So I think that's a big selling point for Peel. And when you're this close to a decision, which Peel has always targeted late October for a decision, you kind of know where you're leaning. But if you haven't informed the schools of your decision, that does leave the door a little bit open. And then on top of that, he was slated to visit Georgia last weekend, didn't make the trip to Athens. So gives even more of a glimmer of hope. Again, I still think Georgia is the leader going into the weekend, but Michigan, as you guys know, has been able to pull rabbits out of its hats on the recruiting trail over the last couple of cycles. I think they are still alive with Peel. They're definitely, getting some oxygen, but they're still alive with Peel. And in terms of um, Jair Hill obviously was on campus this weekend. For those of you guys that don't know, an on 300 prospect out of Kankakee, Illinois. Hill is one of the best athletes in the country. Runs in the 10.7s in the 100 meters. A legit 6'2", about 170 pounds. Has been torn between Michigan and Illinois, which is why Darren is calling it a roller coaster recruitment. It really has been up and down and all over the place. Um, Coming out of the visit, I think we've received a lot of positive vibes. Hill gave me a great interview. I talked to his mom after the game, and she seems a little bit more excited about Michigan. Obviously, a lot of buzz there that she preferred Illinois. So I think Clinkscale, Michigan's co-defensive coordinator Steve Clinkscale, and Michigan's defensive coordinator Jesse Minter have done a really good job of recruiting both Peel and Hill. But I still think Hill's recruitment is a bit of a toss-up. There's no exact decision date at this time. I know Jair's been trying to get it done at some point this fall, and it just hasn't happened. So we'll see how deep that one runs to. And, in terms of the actual question, will Michigan land any DBs? Peel and Hill are by far the top targets at the corner position. The Wolverines have not given up on Florida commit Aaron Gates. I know it seemed like his commitment grew stronger with Florida this summer. He opted to visit Florida instead of Michigan for the barbecue at the Big House. He returned to Florida earlier this fall, and it seemed like it was time to wave the white flag. It really did. I even wrote, it looks like Gates is definitely going to stick with Florida. And you see Jesse Arola actually asked this question. Florida picked up two DBs this past week. Do you think we can get Gates to flip? Um, Not only that, Florida is still very much in the mix with Cormani McClain, who is set to make a decision, five-star corner out of the state of Florida. So, yeah, I mean, look, Gates has always flirted with Michigan. He made it to the spring game in the offseason. He came back in the summer for an official visit. At one point, I was very optimistic that he was going to flip to Michigan. I even have a flip pick in for Gates to land at Michigan. He's a Michigan type of kid. He goes to a high academic high school. He's formed a really good relationship with Klingscale and Minter. Minter will be seeing him later this week. He's been the number one priority as a nickel. He can play some safety, he can play some corner, but he's been the guy at the nickel position. And the fact that Michigan's seeing him this week, the fact that Florida continues to load up on DBs, the door's open there with Gates again. So we've seen this movie before. We saw it last cycle where Michigan feels really good about a guy. He kind of trends away for a little bit, and then the Wolverines are able to make a late surge. And I think that's what's happening with Gates. I think everything is lining up perfectly for Michigan to make a late surge with Aaron Gates and potentially flip him from the Gators. One thing to note with Aaron Gates is I was actually planning to go out and watch him play here in the next week or two, but he did suffer a torn ACL and is currently rehabbing from that. So thoughts with Aaron Gates. Let's go ahead and get to our next question. And this comes from Jesse Areola, who also asked about Chris Peel. So hopefully that answered your Chris Peel question. But he also asked, with Georgia taking a quarterback, are we looking good for Jaden Davis? Yeah, so Georgia took its 2024 quarterback commit, Ryan Puglisi, who rose up from a three-star prospect to a top 100 prospect in the latest On3 2024 rankings. So definitely not a slouch there for Georgia at the quarterback position. But that definitely does help Michigan with its pursuit of Jaden Davis. Like we've mentioned, it seemed like Georgia, for its own reasons, favored Puglisi over Davis. They did bring in Davis for an unofficial visit, but then quickly accepted Puglisi's commitment. So, in terms of other contenders in this recruitment, Davis is at Penn State this weekend for the whiteout. He was obviously at Clemson not too long ago. And I think those are probably the biggest contenders right now. Alabama is still evaluating Davis along with a couple of other quarterbacks. If Alabama makes a big push for Davis, then that'll be a team to watch. But right now, he's in tier one for them, but also in the mix with some other quarterbacks. I think Clemson right now is the biggest threat. North Carolina, you see there on the recruiting prediction machine, also kind of in there. They hosted him for an unofficial visit this fall as well. But Clemson, I think, is the biggest threat. Um, he had a great visit there. He's bonded extremely well with that coaching staff. I feel like with Clemson though, they aren't taking the Michigan approach of, hey, you're our number one guy for sure. I mean, Clemson is still recruiting DJ Lagway, who has an argument as the number one quarterback in this class out of Texas. So Michigan is still taking that approach. Hey, you're our guy. You're our number one dude. We're not recruiting any other guys, or at least we're not offering any other guys. You're the one we're focusing on. He is set to get back on campus for the game against Michigan State next weekend. So Michigan will have another chance to close and really make its push for Jaden Davis. Remember, Michigan had Isaac Wilson on campus, an on 300 quarterback out of Utah, brother of NFL quarterback Zach Wilson. And Michigan did not offer. I mean, it's Wednesday. The visit took place Saturday, and no offer came from the visit. So that should tell you that Michigan is still all in on Jaden Davis. So we'll see how next weekend's visit goes. If Davis continues to balk at making a decision, if he's waiting to see what Clemson does, if he's waiting to see what Alabama does. I mean, that's really the only reason why he hasn't committed to Michigan, right? Or at least that's what you have to assume, considering Michigan has done everything possible from making him the only guy to hosting him on a number of different visits to having personal conversations with Jim Harbaugh, film breakdowns with Matt Weiss. I mean, Michigan has rolled out the maize and blue carpet on several occasions. If they do not close with him this coming weekend, then I think we have to sit back and wait and see what Clemson and Alabama do. Let's see. We have a shout out from a member here, Blue Monster, who's one of our renowned members over on the Fort message board at the Wolverine, who says the investment to the Wolverine is a no brainer. Just do it. Thank you, Blue Monster. And yes, if you missed it at the top of the show, the Wolverine is just $10 until next football season. You can sign up right now. Remember, we are doing a shorter show this week. We're only going to go about 15 more minutes because I will be traveling tomorrow. So if you want your question answered for sure and want an in-depth answer, then make sure to drop a super chat. That money definitely helps with my travel budget, getting around and seeing recruits for you guys. Let's go down to Tyler Butosh, and he asks Nicholas Harbaugh update. Not a lot of movement with Nicholas Harbaugh. Look, the thing with Nick is he's taking his time with the recruiting process. He plays a lot of Saturday games as well for his high school team. And we're talking about Nicholas Harbaugh, 5-star, number one athlete in the country out of Washington, D.C., Archbishop Carroll. Harbaugh, since he does have those games on Saturdays, it's hard for him to go out and make official visits during the fall. He has 3 remaining. He took an official visit to South Carolina and to Michigan last month. He does plan to take one to LSU in December. I would expect Georgia to get a visit, Miami to get a visit. So that would be the 3 to round out. Maryland still kind of in there, but I'm not, sure he would use a visit on Maryland since it's so close by. But I think those are the schools still very much in the mix. Not a lot has changed with Harbaugh. His official visit in September went great. He had a great time meeting with the football staff. He had a great time meeting with the track staff. I actually just put up a story on the Wolverine about Michigan's women's track star, Zaya Holman, really working to help the Wolverines recruit Harbaugh. She is a friend of Harbaugh, dating back to her time in high school. They ran on the same track, and so you can go read that over at the Wolverine.com. But yeah, Ron Bellamy, Michigan's DMV area recruiter, who has really been taking a lead on this recruitment, was in Washington, D.C. yesterday and did see Nicholas Harbaugh. Those two have developed a really strong relationship. Harbaugh is also fond of head coach Jim Harbaugh, Grant Newsome, Michigan's tight ends coach, Mike Elston, Michigan's defensive line coach. So he has good relationships across the board, but Bellamy has really taken the lead here and is really making a big impression on Harbaugh. And like I said, was on the road seeing him yesterday. Um, I still think Michigan has some momentum here, especially coming out of those two official visits. I think South Carolina was a little too optimistic heading into their visit. Believe the South Carolina buzz. I still think they're right up there as well, but they obviously had a dreadful performance when he was there. Michigan checks a lot of boxes for him. He loves the NFL development. He loves the relationship aspect, the family vibe. He has family in the Detroit metro area. The academics, huge for him and his family. This is a kid that has a 4.0 GPA, whose father works for NASA. His mother is a pharmacist. So the academics are really important to him. And that's where Michigan has an advantage over a South Carolina or an LSU. The biggest thing here is the track program. I mean, Michigan traditionally doesn't have a super amazing track program. The climate isn't favorable. Obviously, there are harsh winters in the Midwest, so that's a big selling point for all the SEC schools. But I think with Harbaugh, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. We're going to have to wait and see what happens over the next few months. Shane Johnson, shout out to Shane Johnson. I mean, I wish we had a siren here. Woo, woo, we have a super chat. Shane Johnson says, EJ, seen you on the field in my first row end zone during the game. Next time I will holler for a photo. 19 of 21 wins and our 23 classes in the 20s. Why? So shout out to Shane Johnson. If you were the guy in the shark hat, hoodie, whatever, shout out to you, man. Appreciate the love. If you weren't, I still appreciate the love, and thanks for the $5 super chat. Like I said, guys, shorter show today. If you want your questions answered for sure, make sure to drop a super chat. The money goes towards my travel budget. As to why Michigan is struggling with the 2023 recruiting class, there are various factors here. I think you have to go back to the offseason. Michigan was coming off a college football playoff appearance, riding on top of the world. I remember I got on a plane to Orlando right after Michigan, had played Georgia in the college football playoff, and even though they lost, you could tell that things around the program were different. The momentum was there. I got on a plane to Orlando. I went down to see Raelyn Wilson, who was a top 100 linebacker committed to the Wolverines at the time and is now committed to Georgia. But I remember going down to see Raelyn and being like, man, these are the guys that Michigan's going to start to land. They're going to land Raelyn Wilson level guys. They're going to keep the momentum rolling. I remember a lot of Florida prospects were really high on Michigan, and it was just super exciting to be covering Michigan at that time. And it only lasted for a few weeks because the offseason got really chaotic, right? Jim Harbaugh flirted with the NFL, and he didn't just flirt with the NFL. It wasn't like there were a few rumors and then it was over. I mean, he flirted with the NFL for a long time and during an important time. So in January and into February, heading into the late signing period, um, that the 2023 class, I'm sorry, the 2022 class was mostly wrapped up at that point. But it was a great time to start building relationships with the underclassmen, with getting guys on campus, seeing guys on the road. That was the contact period where Jim Harbaugh was going around to different schools and seeing kids. And the question was always, are you going to be here? Are you going to be here? As opposed to, hey, we just made it to the college football playoff. We just beat Ohio State. We just won a Big Ten title. It was, are you going to be here? And that lasted for a long time. It wasn't just a short period of time, it lasted for a while. And so while that was going on, I think it gave other schools a better opportunity uh, to negative recruit against Michigan and to build relationships. And then you look at the staff as a whole, there were a lot of changes. You lost both your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator. You had assistants leave, you had new assistants come in, you had assistants switch positions. You had Ron Bellamy go from coaching safeties to wide receivers. You had Jay Harbaugh move over to coaching safeties to replace Bellamy. Like there were just a lot of changes for the coaching staff and the guys that they were recruiting. Um, Courtney Morgan was the leader of the recruiting department. He left to Washington and took a fellow staffer with him. The recruiting department got an entire, revamp, and now Albert Karsnia is in that role, who is known as a really hard worker and grinder, but might not have the personal recruiting acumen of a guy like Courtney Morgan. So I still think they haven't quite replaced what Courtney brought to that position. So, you had so many changes, the recruiting department, the coaching staff, the Harbaugh situation, that all, in itself is a lot to get over, which again lasted for several months. The coaching movement, the Harbaugh rumors took a long time to get sorted out. Um, so on top of all of that, right? And you look at a guy like Jair Hill is a perfect example. He visited Michigan during the height of the Harbaugh rumors, and that's why his mom got a sour taste in her mouth. The guy that identified him was Courtney Morgan, who's gone. The guy that started leading his recruitment was Ron Bellamy, who moved over to offense. So, recruiting is still a relationships business, right? Like recruiting is still based around relationships at its core. I know, and we'll get into the other stuff right now, but at its core, it's a relationships business. And when you don't have those early relationships, you suffer later on. You put yourself in a hole that you have to climb out of. Now, Michigan did that last cycle. Can they do that this cycle? We'll see. Winning can cure all, but in this case, I'm not sure Michigan will finish in the top 10 like they did last year. In fact, it looks pretty unlikely. Um, on top of all those changes and the Harbaugh stuff, you had the rise of NIL, and Michigan is still trying to figure out the best way to navigate those lines. They're not doing what a school like Tennessee is doing, or Texas A&M, or Miami, or Oregon, and that's why battles with those schools have been extremely difficult. Michigan can win on the field all day long. But if those recruits are getting guaranteed NIL deals up front, then there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, Michigan was in the lead for a couple of guys that ended up committing to those schools that just abruptly picked those schools. So I don't think Michigan has adapted well to the NIL landscape. I think they've done a great job with getting guys on the team paid for sure. I think Valiant has a lot of great ideas. They've done a good job again with the guys on the team, not only on the football team, the basketball team, creating opportunities for them. Um, but at the end of the day, when we're looking at recruiting, it's definitely not the same. You can see there's a big contrast even between um, Michigan and Michigan State. Michigan State obviously having a poor season, but has a higher ranked recruiting class. So I think the rise of NIL and not adapting to it has hurt Michigan, as well as the offseason drama. If Michigan, so there's a lot of ifs, if Michigan can keep the staff as is next offseason with maybe one or two changes, if they can add to the recruiting department and bring in another guy to help Karsnia, if there are no Jim Harbaugh rumors, if they continue to win like they are winning, then yes, I think the opportunity is there for a top five class. I thought there was an opportunity there for a top five class last year, but you had all of that movement. You had the NIL factor. So we'll see how things kind of play out next cycle. I mean, you already have quite a few 2024 recruits that are really high level prospects interested in Michigan. Will they close with them? Will they adapt to NIL? Will they keep the staff the same? Will we avoid the Harbaugh rumors? I feel like Michigan is Michigan's worst enemy on the recruiting trail. All right, let's get into some other questions. Like I said, guys, it is going to be a shorter show. If you have a super chat, we will answer that first. Your money goes towards my travel budget, which is great. So I can go around the country and see recruits and give you the latest intel and evaluation notes. Um, I think I answered that question for some other questions. Let's go ahead and go to Newber. He says, oh, sorry about that, Newber. Do you think Santa Ono, Michigan's new president, will help with more NIL initiatives next year? So I had a chance to see Santa Ono on the sidelines at Michigan's game this past weekend. It was really cool to see. I saw the student section started up a cheer for him. The regular fans seemed really, really excited about him. He was super interactive on the sidelines with several alumni and some of the 97 team and just random people that I didn't know who they were. He was taking selfies, taking videos of the players working out. You could tell he was really excited to be in Michigan Stadium on the field for such a big game. So our Chris Ballas, our great team writer, has reported that Santa Ono is very pro athletics. I think Santa Ono is going to do everything in his power to make sure that Michigan is catching up at the very least on the NIL front. I do think you'll see him roll out some more NIL initiatives. But again, there's only so much you can do in terms of recruiting NIL as opposed to team NIL. I just think the stuff they are doing with the guys on the team is perfectly fine. If you're going to do recruiting NIL, that means playing in some gray areas. Now, is Santa Ono going to make the push for them to do that? I don't know. That's way above everybody's pay grade. We'll see kind of how that shakes out. But I do think it is positive that Santa Ono is so pro athletics, that he's so excited to be at Michigan, that he's really, really embracing his new role. So I think he will help as much as he can help. Let's go ahead and go down to let's see. We have Oronde Stokes who has a long question. He says, EJ, what is going on with our ranking and recruiting? How are we top 4 in the country and on TV every week? This is ridiculous and embarrassing. We are going up against schools such as South Carolina. I wouldn't diss South Carolina, man. They're actually doing a good job with NIL, and they put together a nice little recruiting staff. I like some of their recruiters, but I gave that long-winded answer right now. I just think, again, it comes down to relationships and with NIL. Let's go down to David Wright. What linebackers do we have a chance with? So does Michigan have a chance with? Well, they were supposed to get Arion Carter on campus this weekend. They did not. It looks like they are slowly slipping away out of the race for the 4-star linebacker out of Tennessee. You have Hayden Moore, who is currently committed to Nebraska. They've been talking to him. He could potentially be a guy that visits, but just linebacker board, man, it's tough. There are a lot of 24s that I like that Michigan is in on early. Aaron Childs, an on 300 prospect out of Only Good Counsel in the DMV. Absolutely love him. Chris Jones, another on 300 prospect out of the DMV. Really like him as well. He was on campus last month. In state, you have Jeremiah Beasley, who's been on campus on several occasions. There are quite a few 24 linebackers that have made it to campus for visits, but 23, man, just looks barren, which is disappointing. Let's go down to Jesse Areola, who says David Hobbs commits the day before the Ohio State game, November 25th. Anything else we can do to land him? Any more visits from him? So Hobbs, 5-star defensive lineman out of the Carolinas, was on campus for an unofficial visit not too long ago, named Michigan in his top 6 today. As of right now, I am not expecting Hobbs to be back for another visit. As far as what Michigan can do, get him back for another visit. His decision date is only a month away. I think if the Wolverines have any chance here for David Hobbs, again, the 5-star defensive lineman from Concord, North Carolina, they have to absolutely get him back on campus and get him to experience a game in the Big House. Remember, he did make an unofficial this fall, but it was like on a Sunday, so he didn't see anything. I mean, he sat down with Harbaugh and met with the staff and all that good stuff, but he didn't see what it was really like to be at Michigan for a game day. Right now, I think Tennessee is the leader with Alabama probably second. So this one, a bit of an uphill battle. Guys, we have reached the 30-minute marker. Like I said, this week's going to be a little bit of a shorter show. We'll probably only go a few more minutes. So if you want your question answered, make sure to send a super chat and we will get to that first. Devon Robinson has sent a 199 super chat, but we can't see his question. So, Devon, if you have a question, please submit it. We do appreciate the super chat. Maybe our producer Matt can communicate with him. But let's go ahead and go down to next question in order. This comes from Shadyville03. With the way we run the ball, should there be more of a focus on bigger bodied wide receivers? Your Darius Clemens types, larger receivers are also more effective in the red zone. So yeah, Michigan did take a look at some bigger receivers early on. They liked a guy like Nathan Leacock, who ended up committing to Tennessee. They explored Malik Elzy out of Chicago, who actually just backed out of his pledge to Cincinnati. I think next cycle is a much stronger year for wide receiver in general. So I think they're definitely going to go after some of those bigger bodies next cycle. I think this cycle it's a little late in the game. The guys that are there right now at the top of the board, like Jaron Hamilton and Carmelo English, aren't necessarily those big body types. I think Michigan was really banking on Kenyon Sadiq out of Idaho. He would have been that big body type, but obviously he picked Oregon. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, the NIL Ducks are very difficult to beat on the trail. Let's go to Hugh, who asked, I guess we'll leave his name up there. Who cares? Where is Chris Peel headed, in your opinion? Like I said earlier, Michigan is still battling. I think right now, I would go with Georgia. I have a pick in for Georgia. Georgia makes the most sense, but he hasn't told Michigan no. And Michigan always does a good job of finding ways to surprise people. Um, let's go down to uh, Oronde Stokes. He's angry today, so hopefully Oronde get some hugs. But all this silent commitment to our team is played out, and they announce their commitments. What are they running around? Just collecting from collection plates. Okay, I think Aronde, in his angry rage, is asking. Michigan has gotten some silent commits this cycle, and then these recruits turn around and commit elsewhere. What's happening? Yeah, I mean, there's no way around it. I mean, if you're a silent commit, you're not really a commit. And even if you're a verbal commit, you're not really a commit. If somebody comes around with an NIL offer, that can change things dramatically. And I think we've seen that this cycle more than any cycle with the rise of NIL is just, hey, if school X comes and they're willing to, you know, offer you a guaranteed deal, then yeah, I mean things can change on a dime. Let's go rapid fire. A few more questions. Like I said, if you have a super chat, we'll get to that immediately. Um, let's go ahead and go to Scott Knapp. He says, any chance of flipping any players from teams that are struggling in the win column? Yeah, I think so. I think, Notre Dame obviously is not doing so hot on the field. They're coming off another loss. I think you could see a Notre Dame commit or two on campus at some point. You look at Oklahoma, they're a dumpster fire. I think re exploring Jacoby Johnson is definitely worth it as well. Um, let's go ahead and go down to Mike G, who just gives a shout out. Thank you, Mike G. Appreciate you. We answered your question earlier about Jaden Davis. Yes, I do think the Georgia taking Ryan Puglisi helps Michigan with Jaden Davis. Let's see if there's anything else down here. We'll just run through these questions. Shadyville03 says, should there be any concern that Alabama and Georgia aren't pushing for Davis? Not necessarily. I mean, those are the two of the best programs in the country, obviously. I mean, we've talked about Davis before. There are some concerns just with his height. He's right at about 6 foot, 6 foot and a half. Accuracy issues, only completing a little more than 50% of passes last year, but has taken a step in that department this year. More control issues in terms of, sailing passes or throwing balls in the dirt. Needs to have a little bit more touch, but still think he's a high level quarterback, and obviously Michigan does as well. Looks like we had a ton of other questions, guys. So sorry I did not get to all of them tonight. We did have to cut this show a little short today. I will be traveling tomorrow. I will be traveling. If you want to sneak in a super chat, you can right now. But I will be traveling tomorrow, heading out to a game, on Friday as well. Seeing 2 Michigan commits this week. So you can follow me on Twitter at EJ Holland on 3 for some live videos from those games. You can subscribe to the Wolverine.com for more in-depth takes and evaluation notes after those games, and you can subscribe right now to the Wolverine.com. $10 until next football season. It's a great deal, so take advantage of it now. Drop a like at this video to 500 likes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is completely free. Like I said, guys, I am sorry I didn't get to all your questions tonight. Just limited on time. I usually always do, but we'll make sure to get back next week and answer all of your questions then. Thanks to those that submitted the super chat. Like I said, it helps with our travel budget. Hope all of y'all have a great night.